Mr. President, I rise today to talk about the effort by my Republican colleagues to gut critical consumer privacy protections. Last week, the Senate voted 50 to 48 to allow internet service providers like Comcast, Verizon, and AT&T to freely collect, share, and sell its customers' private information. Later today, the House will vote on the same measure. Let's be clear what we're talking about here, from web browsing histories to app usage information. Broadband providers have easy access to a whole lot of Americans' personal information. Comcast knows exactly what ails you when you visit WebMD's symptom checker, or that you've recently experienced a major life event when you're browsing maternity clothes on Target.com. And they'd like the ability to use or sell this information to target advertising toward you. And they really like to use or sell this information without first having to ask your permission. Now, for me, the interests of consumers in Minnesota and in Texas and across our country have always come before those of big corporations. That's why I've long championed an internet that's open, accessible, and protects Americans' fundamental rights to privacy. And for most Americans, I don't think those are controversial ideas. For example, I suggest that most, if not all, of us in the Senate believe in the importance of ensuring that Americans have access to affordable, high-speed internet. It's one of those great issues where members on both sides of the aisle can agree. See, we all know that Americans' cable and broadband bills are far too high. Consumer Federation of America recently reported that the average American household spends about $2,700 a year for phone, TV, and internet services. That's why it's so disappointing that instead of acting to make broadband more affordable and more accessible for Americans, my Republican colleagues have actually paved the way for multi-billion-dollar companies to make even more money off of their consumers by monetizing some of the most intimate details of their lives. Make no mistake about it, this is purely and simply a corporate handout at the expense of Americans' privacy. When the FCC voted to pass the broadband privacy rules, the broadband industry was quick to oppose and oppose loudly. And in recent months, internet service providers have used their vast services to lobby the FCC and my fellow lawmakers. If House Republicans heed their call, as my colleagues in the Senate have done, companies like Comcast, Verizon, and AT&T will be free to sell their customers' personal information to the highest bidder. And importantly, they'll do so without the oversight or regulation of either the Federal Communications Commission or the Federal Trade Commission. For my part, I've long held that Americans have a fundamental right to privacy. We deserve both transparency and accountability from companies that have the capacity to trade on their private information. And should some people choose to leave their personal information in the hands of those companies, they certainly deserve to know that their information is being safeguarded to the greatest degree possible. I'm going to keep fighting on behalf of consumers in Minnesota and across the country to secure these rights, because I work for them and not the broadband industry. Thank you, Mr. President.